Well, let's continue Module 8, dealing with more extreme mental disorders. And we left off by just giving a quick overview of the 6 categories of mental illness: anxiety disorders, mood disorders, psychotic disorders, personality disorders, eating disorders, sleep disorders. Let's take a look at each of these in turn. There are things that you may run into. And again, these disorders can come about because of sin. They may be due to physical body factors as well. I think Dr. Smith's 5 categories of mental illness is very helpful in this regard. So anxiety disorders are a cluster of mental disorders characterized by significant and uncontrollable feelings of anxiety and fear, such that a person's social, occupational, and personal function are significantly impaired. Anxiety may cause physical and cognitive symptoms such as restlessness, irritability, easy fatigability, difficulty concentrating, increased heart rate, chest pain, abdominal pain, and a variety of other symptoms that may vary based on the individual. Second are mood disorders. A mood disorder, also known as an affective disorder, is any of a group of conditions of mental and behavioral disorder where a disturbance in a person's mood is the main underlying feature. And of course, we include depression under this category, but there are others like bipolar and so on. Psychosis is a condition of the mind that results in difficulties determining what is real and what is not real. Symptoms may include delusions and hallucinations, among other features. Personality disorders are a class of mental disorders characterized by enduring maladaptive patterns of behavior, cognition, and inner experience, exhibited across many contexts and deviating from those accepted by the individual's culture. Paranoid personality disorder, characterized by a pattern of irrational suspicion and a mistrust of others, interpreting motivations as malevolent. We'll run into a few of these people over time, and it's a challenge to get them right, but of course you can do so. Antisocial personality disorder, pervasive pattern of disregard for and violation of the rights of others, lack of empathy and remorse, callousness, bloated self-image, manipulative and impulsive behavior. Borderline personality disorder, pervasive pattern of abrupt emotional outbursts, fear of abandonment, unhealthy attachment, altered empathy, instability in relationships, self-image, identity, behavior, and effect, often leading to self-harm and impulsivity. Histrionic personality disorder, pervasive pattern of attention-seeking behavior, including excessive emotions, an impressionistic style of speech, inappropriate seduction, exhibitionism, and egocentrism. Narcissistic personality disorder, pervasive pattern of superior grandiosity, haughtiness, need for admiration, deceiving others, and a lack of empathy. In a more severe expression, criminal behavior is present, but such individuals are remorseful. Avoidant personality disorder, pervasive feelings of social inhibition and inadequacy, extreme sensitivity to negative evaluation. dependent personality disorder, pervasive psychological need to be cared for by other people, obsessive compulsive personality disorder, characterized by rigid conformity to rules, perfectionism, and control to the point of satisfaction and exclusion of leisurely activities and friendships, distinct from obsessive compulsive disorder. This is a personality disorder, not the disorder itself. Eating disorders, a mental disorder defined by abnormal eating behaviors that negatively affect a person's physical or mental health. Types of eating disorders include binge eating disorder, where the patient eats a large amount in a short period of time. Anorexia nervosa, where the person has an intense fear of gaining weight and restricts food or overexercises to manage this fear. Bulimia nervosa, where individuals eat a large quantity, binging, then try to rid themselves of the food, that is by purging. There are sleep disorders, medical, that is sleep apnea. I suffered from this for maybe 25 years and finally got some relief. And that's why I think I enjoy sleeping so much. I never got 6 hours or 7 hours of sleep, never. But with some help from some sleep doctors and not anything with medication, I'm good to go. So sleep disorders, trauma. And I want to comment here, and I think it's very wise for you to understand that you need to resist the temptation to categorize these disorders so that there's no, like you're this but not that. You can have a sleep disorder that causes you anxiety and other things. I mean, just go without sleep for a while. Psychosis is not far from you. I never went over into that, but it was not healthy. I had difficulty concentrating and so on. So there's a bleed over. There's interconnectivity. There's blurry lines. One's connected to the other, and there's cause and effect. You have to be very wise. What if there's trauma causing a loss of sleep, which causes other serious mental disorders? Be wise. Look for cause and effect, or look for reciprocal cause and effect. Disorders tend to interconnect, and so be wise. Well, what to do with a mental disorder? It's obvious they're narcissistic, and I don't know where it's coming from yet, but understand that only the Bible has answers for the immaterial. Sure, there could be a sleep disorder, there could be a brain injury, there could be some kind of health thing that's an affective disorder, a mood disorder. Listen, there can be very complicated things going on here, but only biblical counselors can rightfully and effectively deal with disorders related to sin. Let's look at the mental illness of King Saul in 1 Samuel 16, 14 to 16. Now the Spirit of Yahweh departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from Yahweh tormented him. So the servants of Saul said to him, "Look, please, an evil spirit from God is tormenting you. Please let our Lord command your servants who are before you. Let them seek a man skilled in playing on the lyre. When the evil spirit from God is upon you, he can play it, and you will feel better." So here's the analysis of of what's going on. You have a spirit of Yahweh departing from Saul, and an evil spirit from Yahweh is tormenting him. Now, it could be an evil spirit like Satan coming from the presence of Yahweh, just like what happened in the book of Job. Now, Satan is allowed to go up to the Lord and request permission to torment, as he did with Job. And so it's possible it's like that. It's not like God is causing this, but God is allowing this, I think is more correct. So the servants come up with this idea, maybe we can do some music therapy, make them feel better. So when they were coming back after David had returned from striking down the Philistine, the women went out from all the cities of Israel singing and dancing to meet King Saul with tambourines, with joy, and with three-stringed instruments. And the women sang as they danced, and they said, Saul has struck down his thousands, but David his 10,000s. Saul became very angry, and this saying displeased him, and he thought, they have attributed to David 10,000s, but to me they have attributed thousands. What more can he have but the kingdom? So here comes jealousy and fear into the life of Saul. Okay? Jealousy and fear. And it makes him crazy. And he has this elevated position as king. Evidently, he loves, and it may be narcissism that's going on, or histrionics, where he has this need for attention. He has this need for the world to revolve around him. And instead of being happy for David, he's unhappy. Clearly, this is a sinful, unrepentant state. So Saul was watching David with suspicion from that day onward. On the next day, the evil spirit from God rushed upon Saul, and he prophesied in the middle of the house. Now David was playing the lyre with his hand on that day as usual, and the spear was in Saul's hand. Then Saul hurled the spear and thought, I will pin David to the wall. But David eluded him twice. Now Saul was threatened by the presence of David because Yahweh was with him, but had departed from Saul. Now, why did Yahweh depart from Saul? Probably because Saul is sinful. And why is Saul threatened by David? Because Yahweh's with David, not with him. He knows it. And instead of correcting the situation by confessing his sins, he rather goes and gets into a murderous rage and wants David dead. This is absolute craziness. So Liuboth Ben Nun wrote an article, What was the mental disease that affected King Saul? And I think it's helpful just to do some analysis here. Among many disorders that could have affected the king, manic episode with psychotic phases, major depression with psychotic features, mixed episode, bipolar disorder 1, dysthymic disorder later developed into bipolar disorder or non-specific psychotic disorder are the most likely. And among these diagnoses, bipolar disorder 1 is the most acceptable. Now, the reason that I source this article is that he's coming from, apparently, a very naturalistic viewpoint. When he says dysthymic, he's talking about physical things. And there are systems of counseling that have to do with the physical world only. So, you're curious and you ask yourself the question, and maybe this would be a great paper for someone to write. How would you treat King Saul? Let's see what happens. Then David got up afterward and went out of the cave. This is a little further along, where Saul goes into the cave to relieve himself. David trims the hem of his garment and then later shows it to him. So David could have killed him. He didn't. And David got up afterward and went out of the cave and called after Saul, "My lord the king." When Saul looked after him, David knelt down with his face to the ground and bowed down. And David said to Saul, "Why do you listen to the words of people who say, 'Look, David is seeking to do you harm'? Look, this day your eyes have seen that Yahweh gave you today into my hand in the cave. And some said to kill you, but I took pity on you and said, I will not stretch out my hand against my Lord, because he is Yahweh's anointed one." Now my father, see, yes, see, the hem of your robe in my hand. David offers Saul physical evidence. It's like they're in a courtroom, and David is making this claim that he does not want to murder Saul and that it's all false. He's confronting him with the sinful reality of its mental state. "For when I cut the hem of your robe, I did not kill you. No one realized that there is no evil or rebellion in my hand. I did not sin against you, but you are hunting down my life to take it. May Yahweh judge between me and you, and may Yahweh avenge me on you, but my hand will not be against you. Just as the ancient proverb says, from the wicked, wickedness goes out. But my hand will not be against you. After whom did the king of Israel go out? After whom are you pursuing? After a dead dog? After one flea? May Yahweh be the judge. Let him judge between me and you. And may he see and plead my case. May he vindicate me against you." Well, this is fascinating because David gets into the courtroom of God and asks God to plead his case. "Look, I'm not trying to murder you. You have created this unreality, Saul. It's you who have done this." And you see, it's all because of sin. And so we have this fantastic example in the scriptures of someone who has created something unreal. So when David finished speaking these words to Saul, Saul said, "Is this your voice, my son David?" And Saul lifted up his voice and wept. Then he said to David, "You are more righteous than I, for you have repaid me the good. But I have repaid you the evil. You have explained to me today that you have dealt with me with me, how Yahweh delivered me into your hand, but you did not kill me." With all of that heavy conviction, reality comes crashing down on Saul. Reality. And he realizes his sin. He's healed in a moment. "A man has found his enemy, but sent him on his way safely. Now may Yahweh reward you with good in return for this day, for what you've done for me. Now then look, I know that you will certainly be king, and the kingdom of Israel will be established in your hand. So then swear to me by Yahweh that you will not cut off my descendants after me, and that you will not wipe out my name from my father's house." So David swore this on oath to Saul, and Saul went to his house. But David and his men went up to the stronghold. So now we're going to turn to a couple of specific things, counseling trauma and counseling grief. And so what I would like to do is get as far as we can through these things. We may get through it all. But to set us up for counseling addiction in Module 9, and then come back around to what does a biblical counseling church look like. And I'm setting this up. I think that the local church is a unit for counseling. So, post-traumatic stress disorder. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a mental health condition that's triggered by a terrifying event, either experiencing it or witnessing it. Symptoms may include flashbacks, nightmares, and severe anxiety, as well as uncontrollable thoughts about the event. So, this is a plague in the military and among first responders. And a great number of people just because they've suffered some accident or trauma. In fact, I imagine that there are few people who are free from trauma and who are completely free from flashbacks and nightmares and anxiety, including uncontrollable thoughts about some past trauma. Even if you have a great attitude and you're very stable, you're a strong Christian, you can suffer from this. It's just the way that God wired us to process trauma. He made it so that we suppress the immediate trauma so that we can function at some level. Or we suppress the immediate trauma because it's so very overwhelming. And he just wired us this way. So there are intrusive memories, recurrent, unwanted, distressing memories of the traumatic event. Reliving the traumatic event as it were happening again. That's flashbacks. Flashbacks are very vivid, and because I've had traumatic flashbacks, I know what they're about because of my experience with extreme chemotherapy and leukemia. Upsetting dreams or nightmares about the traumatic event. Severe emotional distress or physical reactions to something that reminds you of the traumatic event. So I've had flashbacks that included sights and sounds and even smells. That's how vivid it can be. Trying to avoid thinking or talking about the traumatic event, avoiding places, activity, or people that remind you of that. And what triggered my flashback was walking around a park near the hospital where I received all that treatment. And I actually was circling around the park, and I looked up, and just over there was the hospital room where I had received treatment. I could see the window of that room because it looked out over the park. And I felt it. I smelled it. My mind displaced. And I just wouldn't go back. It's unpleasant. It wasn't devastating, but it was definitely unpleasant, something to avoid. There are negative changes in thinking and mood, negative thoughts about yourself, other people, or the world. And this is where really satanic thoughts can intrude, and you can blame yourself. You can count yourself cursed. You can convince yourself that God has cursed you or hates you or some other thing. Or you could say, lie to yourself, well, I did, sin X, whatever sin X is, and that's why this came on me, when it didn't. And it just happened to you, and it's ultimately for the glory of God. But even if it is divine discipline, confess the sin, leave it behind, and think right about the past and the future. Hopelessness about the future, memory problems, including not remembering important aspects of the traumatic event. You can black things out. Difficulty maintaining close relationships. Feeling detached from family and friends. Lack of interest in activities you once enjoyed. Difficulty experiencing positive emotions. Feeling emotionally numb. Changes in physical and emotional reactions. And so, of course, this is all very important for you to consider as a counselor as you interview. You might just hear some things that make you think, or ask the question, have you ever experienced anything traumatic? Because if you ask the question, have there been recent changes in your mood? Do you still enjoy the same things that you did in the past? That kind of thing. Do you still have things that engage your interest? You can be easily startled or frightened. You can hear a car backfire, and it brings back memory of gunfires or bombs, and you dive under cover. Always being on guard for danger, self-destructive behavior, such as drinking too much or driving too fast. Many people who have survived traumatic experiences will feel bulletproof, feel like they can never die, and they go out and drive foolishly and die in that manner. Of course, they may have trouble sleeping from the nightmares, concentrating from lack of sleep, irritability, angry outbursts, or aggressive behaviors, overwhelming guilt or shame. All of these things, emotional reactions. There's some special things you need to know about PTSD in children. For children 6 years old and under, signs and symptoms may also include reenacting the traumatic event or aspects of the traumatic event through play. Frightening dreams that may or may not include aspects of the traumatic event. So, if there's a child that's acting out, give them an opportunity, or if the parents or neighbors might enjoy observe this traumatic event happening or being reenacted, then it's time to engage in counseling. Let's talk about grief counseling and just some cultural issues that may be involved. Every culture has its own way of coping with the loss of loved ones that's developed into a system of mourning. And I think you'll be better prepared for grief counseling if you know these things. The system of mourning is meant to adequately cope with the pain of mourning through various traditions. The traditions aim to deal with the issues of sorrow, guilt, pride, anger, loss, and generally the meaning of life in this world. Many traditions are woefully inadequate and plant the seeds of neurosis and insanity. Other traditions deal with the issues in a godly way, forming the basis for healing and return of real joy in life. A way to assess the elements of cultural tradition is to ask the questions, what's the purpose of the tradition? What's the purpose of burial? What's the purpose of the Viking funeral with putting the body on the burning boat? What's the purpose of, putting a body up on a scaffold and like the Native Americans and exposing them to the elements? What is the purpose of the tradition? But once you get to the purpose, does the tradition promote healing or harm? And you might need to work within some cultural boundaries there. Practical issues, care for the body, engage with the funeral director, care for the body, be present, understand. And when I say be present, sometimes the grief is so intense that you could bubble out a lot of words and they're not as meaningful as just being there for the person. There is something to say about being there for a person who is who's really grieving. There is also a post-funeral letdown syndrome. What I mean by that is in the days and weeks after the funeral, the person doesn't have anything busy engaging them, and they tend to be let down. And there's a great emptiness and depression that comes because all of that busy work is gone, all the family has gone home. Let me warn you about interaction with funeral directors. Funeral business is a great money-making business. They're very typically involved in exploiting people's grief for money. Selling expensive coffins, expensive coffin liners, expensive gravestones, really kind of shooting for the moon there. And as a counselor or a pastor, you can protect them from being exploited during the time of grief. Awareness of family stress and dysfunction. Oh boy. When someone passes away, even suddenly, there can be a tremendous amount of stress, and all those little things that are kind of suppressed come out. It's a time where people remember past hurts. It's a time where people can be at their worst, be protective. It's a great time to be a peacemaker. It's a time to suggest that perhaps it would be better to address those things later. And then work with funeral directors. I had some great ones over the years, especially for military funerals, that really weren't interested in taking care of the family and making sure all the details were addressed. And there are practical details there. What to do with the body, how to transfer the body to the cemetery, how to interact with the cemetery so that there's a hole in the ground, those kinds of things. Let's talk about, in John 11, 20 to 26, some cultural issues. Now Martha, when she heard that Jesus was coming, went to meet him, but Mary was sitting in the house. So Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Even now I know that whatever you ask God, God will grant you." And Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." And Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me, even if he dies, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die forever. Do you believe this?" A couple of things to notice. One, Martha attempts to blame Jesus, and she's a little, I think, passive-aggressive here. My brother would not have died. She's blaming him. And then she displays her knowledge of resurrection. "I know that whatever you ask God, God will grant you." And Jesus shifts and said, "Your brother will rise again." No, I don't think he's talking about the immediate future. I think he's talking about in the resurrection. And the number one thing that you can do for a person who's going through intense grief is to orient to the future resurrection of that individual. Likewise, 1 Thessalonians 4:13-18. There is a different category of comfort for Christians because we have hope. There's a grief for those who have no hope, and it's a terrible, desolating grief. And there's a grief for those who do have hope. And then he goes on to talk about the blessed hope and assurance that either we will be on earth when the rapture occurs and go up to meet God in the air, meet Jesus in the air, or we'll be with Jesus and come from heaven. But that's the moment of resurrection. And there's a command from Paul to this church at Thessalonica: comfort one another with these words. So, we have hope of the resurrection, and we're commanded to comfort each other in times of grief. And it must be a real comfort. I know I have received it. Everybody eventually will. So, I want to go on to treatment of an individual who has suffered some trauma, even childhood trauma. And this is my take on Genesis 9:20-27. Noah began farming and planted a vineyard. This was not long after they made landfall, post-flood. Naturally, Noah would make a priority out of food production. He was 600 years old at the time and still prepared to do the harsh work of farming. And bringing agricultural order out of post-flood chaos must have been harsh work indeed. It's interesting to note that Noah planted a prosperity crop, a vineyard, right away. So, under normal Napa Valley conditions, it takes 5 years of painstakingly careful pruning to produce good wine-bearing grapes from a grapevine. Might have taken even longer in the harsh conditions which followed the global flood. But it could have been 4 years, could have been 6 years, but not long after. And also, there's a little Hebrew construction here, the walk consecutive. We don't know if Noah planted those grapevines right away or he waited a few years. It's a prosperity crop, may have been a while. Never defines the amount of time that passes, only that some time has passed. 4 years, 6 years, 8 years, 10. Whatever, he ended up with wine, and he became drunk. And he uncovered himself inside the tent. So he's out of his mind drunk, and he uncovers himself. And it describes cause and effect. The cause, Noah became drunk. The effect, he lay naked and helpless inside his tent. Noah was not used to strong drink. Likely his first experience with alcohol. And from this verse and the following verse, the conclusion is clear that he is unconscious. He's passed out from his drunkenness. So in verse 22, Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers outside. Now, it says, for whatever reason, we now know Canaan is born. And it mentions Ham, and it mentions his son. And he sees the nakedness of his father. And he goes out and he tells his two brothers, hey, Father Noah's in there without any clothes. And that seems honorable. The verb to see here means to perceive with the eyes, and beyond that, to understand what's sensed with the eyes. He perceived what is there. He didn't just see his naked father. He saw something more. The father's condition was erawath, nakedness. It's worthwhile to note that this word is almost always portrays the nakedness of a woman with sexual implications. Sometimes it's rape, other times it's female seduction, but the sexual overtones are there. And this is what Ham, the father of Canaan, saw in his father. And you start to put these things together. That there's more than just what's on the surface. That Ham understands the potential of the nakedness of his own father. And he calls his brothers. But something has transpired in the meantime. Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid upon both their shoulders, and walked backward and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned away so that they did not see their father's nakedness. This is a cultural element of early post-flood history. I think that all of us should be careful about nakedness because we may see the potential in it. But do we need to be this extreme? Some cultures, no problem. Other cultures are more strict, less modest. We live on an island where up to a certain age there's hardly any modesty. And but beyond that age, reasonable modesty. It's kind of interesting, the mix. Here's something for the modern man. It is not okay to see the nakedness of others of your own sex, not even of family, unless it's your spouse or perhaps young children. I think from this passage we can be cautious about that. You may laugh and it may be okay with you, but a general caution is legitimate. These two were extremely prudent. I think it's the result of their experience with their antediluvian civilization. That degenerate society indulged in every perversion, and thus Noah kept his family in a very strict state. So they do these things in the right way according to their experience and according to their norms and standards, and they take care of their father with great care. And it's obvious they're avoiding temptation. I think they've seen too much. So when Noah awoke from his wine, he knew what his youngest son had done to him. What did he know? He was unconscious, so he had no conscious memory, but Ham has done something to us, or to him, to Noah. What is it? And I think Ham did more than look upon his father with lust, and that this was a sin against his own father, where his father experienced some pain. Because that kind of knowledge mentioned is yada. He knew, he had an intimate knowledge Often this word describes intimate sexual knowledge between man and his wife. How did he know? He sensed it by feeling. Let's not go too much further into this. It's a sin against Noah. And because Noah was unconscious, it was rape. Nothing to do with race, as some say about this passage. So Noah says, "Cursed be Canaan. A servant of servants he shall be to his brothers." So supposedly some have said, notably Jefferson Davis, President of the Confederate States of America, that Noah has cursed the race of Ham to be slaves forever, and the curse of Ham is dark skin. Nonsense. Doesn't exist. So he notices and says, Canaan is cursed. The curse is on Canaan. It's not on Ham. It's on Canaan. Why is Canaan cursed? He's not pronouncing a curse. He's not saying, "I curse thee, Canaan." But what Noah does here, it's a typical way to think. I feel sorry for the son of this man, because if Ham would do this to his father, he would do it to his son, and that would inevitably mess him up. Canaan was alive at this time. Noah calls him by name. Canaan is the youngest of the 4 sons of Ham. From the way Noah speaks, it's possible that Canaan's brothers are all grown up, but Canaan is still in the fold. So what does he do? He removes him from the household. He'll be the lowest of servants to his grown brothers. He'll be the lowest of servants to his uncles. Not because of some intrinsic problem, not because he's a sinner, but because he's been harmed. He's been, I think, raped by his own father. And Noah doesn't extend the curse in any sense beyond the first generation, but we have a treatment pattern. He denotes the curse with the cal passive participle, and it shows the person or thing in a state which has been brought about by external actions. He identifies that Canaan is cursed by someone else, his father. He's not exerting the curse from his own willpower. He's observing a curse that's already in effect. And it's horrible. So Noah observes that the kid is going to be a mess, and he'll be the lowest of servants to his brothers. And he also said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant." And it's an expression of compassion and wisdom from Noah. He suggests that Canaan should be taken from the house of his father and given as a servant to Shem. So it would remove Canaan from a truly horrible situation, and maybe make some use of him by putting him under strict, slave-like authority. Enforced discipline is a good suggestion, and maybe the only hope for Canaan, and I think it can form a good pattern for children who have been abused. May God enlarge Japheth, and let him dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. He also suggests that Japheth live with Shem, and pay special attention to Canaan through kind of a authoritative relationship. And I think it's what Canaan needs. Tell me, when there's inpatient treatment for an addict or someone dealing with trauma, aren't they put in a rigorous routine? Isn't that right? Canaan may have turned out all right. According to Genesis 10:15-19, Canaan became the father of Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, and the Jebusite, and the Amorite, and the Girgashite, and the Hivite, and the Archite, and the Sinite, Arvadite, Zemarite, and Hamathite. And afterward the families of the Canaanite were spread abroad. And the territory of the Canaanite extended from Sidon as you go toward Gerar, as far as Gaza, as you go toward Sodom and Gomorrah, and Admah and Zeboim, as far as Lasha. He had children. He owned a lot of land. The Canaanites later were a pretty wicked people, but the family heritage and the territory were pretty nice. They occupied a fair chunk of what would become the promised land. So we really don't know how Canaan turned out spiritually, but we know that he went on to be a responsible father. And I just think that it may be a nice resource, a biblical pattern, immediate and permanent, perhaps, separation of the child from his acute abuser, attachment to another good member of the family, and I think family members preferred if you've got a decent one, strict and forced discipline with the child, certainly in a loving environment. We worked with a youth ranch for a number of years, and they had group housing. And they had a strict regime, a very strict routine for the children who had been abused. And this just has to continue until the child becomes an adult. Add in a spiritual life. Maybe the individual will become a normal and productive member of society and not just go on to the next generation. Well, what we've got ahead of us is we're going to look at analysis and treatment for addiction, especially from the biblical worldview, and that's coming in our next module. I think I can just say with a word of caution, boy, the world's got a lot of ideas on how to treat addiction. And secular humanism and other worldviews or worldview approaches to therapy will have their way to treat. But I really like what I see in Genesis chapter 9. Relocate. Remove from the evil. Get to a safe place. And in that safe place, you can begin to heal. Do a routine. Get spiritual values and spiritual habits into the life of that person. Dear friends of ours work in the field of foster homes, and one has organized a company now going for several years of taking extreme cases of child abuse, even child sexual abuse. They put them in the new home, train the foster parents, and boy, they're doing good work. And I think it just kind of rewards the biblical pattern that you really can do it this way. Other forms of addiction and mental illness, a change in environment, a relocation, really can be effective. Remember, there has to be repentance, there has to be confession, there has to be new priorities. We have a great advantage from the biblical worldview. of knowing a human being as God has revealed him, body, mind, and spirit. We have special revelation from the God who created us. He allows evil in this world, but he puts in his world, in his word, the truths and the practicalities of how to heal. And it is all there for his glory. And I pray that you will be a great, wonderful part of bringing healing to the lives of others. Okay, see you in Module 9.